How many devices are you connected to every day? Think about your phone, your computer, your speakers, your smartwatch. Statistics show the average American is connected to more than 10 devices, and that number is growing. By connecting to each device, you're also trusting them to keep your information safe, and you're taking a risk. There's always the chance of a security breach, but there are ways to protect yourself from a breach or lessen the severity. Today, we're talking with René Waslo about cybersecurity. René is a risk and financial advisory principal at Deloitte, and she works specifically in the energy, resources, and industrial sector. She's been at Deloitte for 24 years, and things have changed a lot in cyber since her early days. So let's talk about zero trust, sustainability, trends in cybersecurity, and encouraging women to go into cyber. Without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to Truth Be Known. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Truth Be Known. We have a very exciting guest today. We have René Waslo. She's the Risk and Financial Advisory Principal at Deloitte. René, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Lauren. So pleased to be here.
We are very, very excited. We don't get to talk about cybersecurity nearly enough. Before we get to it, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Yes. In the US right now, but I'm born and bred in South Africa, and I moved out to the United States probably now about, it was in 1995, I think, that I moved to the United States. So my accent is totally gone, I think. But I studied, IT and accounting in South Africa. I mean, there was no such thing as cyber degrees at the time. And the company that I was with back in 95, they actually asked me to come over to the U.S., in essence, to come and help out one of our member firms here in the U.S. with cybersecurity as well. So I kind of sort of started doing IT control and security assurance work, and then sort of moved into this whole space of cyber as time went on. And it was just a great experience and just sort of never stopped. I did a lot of M&A work, mergers and acquisitions work at one point. And with that, one of my clients were going through an acquisition. And obviously, we had a lot of our M&A focused people doing the actual integration. And I asked the question, I said, well, what about cyber during the integration? And that sort of got started on focusing cyber in the M&A space. It sort of also started focusing on industry quite a bit more, which is really where I'm focused right now, is that intersection between industry and cyber, which I find absolutely fascinating. But it's been a crazy good journey. More than 30 years now that I've been in the space, and a lot of people will say, well, 30 years ago there was no such thing as cyber, right? And it's like, well, it was. It just had different names, right? So, but it's been great.
That's awesome. I mean, I can imagine how much cybersecurity has changed in the last 30 years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I think about what we did back then versus what it is now, I mean, and a lot of people will say, well, how do you keep up with it? It's building blocks, right? Everything kind of just continues to build on top of each other. So even though it was a long time ago that I got started, the good news is that nothing that you do in life ever is wasted. It's just, part of a growth journey, really.
Absolutely. Sometimes I think back going, it's funny, I was a bartender when I was 20. There are things that I learned bartending that I thought would be completely useless. Like, this doesn't matter. You're a 20-year-old bartender, that I still sort of apply to things that I do every day today. And you're 100% right. It's these weird building blocks of experiences that you don't know. All of a sudden, one day in the future, you're going to remember this, and that's going to sort of make you part of who you are today.
All right, absolutely. I mean, even bartending. I mean, it's relationships, right? It's meeting
100%.
people, talking to strangers, being able to build rapport. There's so much that you learn with everything you do. It's great.
100%. That's exactly what I took away from the time that I had there. And there's no other job that will ever teach you how to build rapport quickly. And then also how to act under pressure, because people are very cranky.
Oh, yes. So no, it's definitely, and I'd say our profession is no different. It's about, even though it's cyber that we're talking about, it's about relationships, because cyber is trust. It's building digital trust in your environment, your systems. I mean, but for us to be able to do that for clients, they need to trust us as humans, as persons, right, as people. So it definitely does kind of come back to also the ability to be able to build those relationships.
100%. And I know you do a lot with energy in the energy industry. I would love to learn more about what you're doing as a cyber professional within energy.
Yes, and so it's we within Deloitte we actually focus as professionals. We focus on a technical specialty, so in this case, cyber. But then the other piece of what we do is we make sure that we're focused on an industry, and so in my case, it is energy resources and industrials, and really the purpose of that is while there's certain aspects of, I'll call it a technical proficiency, that you can say is agnostic to an industry. If I go out and talk to a client, they want to know that I understand their issues, right? And I've got to be able to take that agnostic, technical, something that we're talking about and make it really applicable to their world. And so being able to understand their industry and the trends that are happening in their industry, as well as the challenges that they're facing, and knowing that what they're facing is not unique. It probably was faced by somebody else that we just talked to a week ago or will be tomorrow. And we can come up with solutions that we can help them implement or even foresee is really critical. So being able to speak the language of our clients is huge. And so we've placed a very big emphasis on not only being technically proficient, but also being industry proficient.
And then what kind of areas in cyber do you typically advise on within energy resources and industrials?
Personally, I have a couple areas that I focus on, like strategy, systems like SAP, and so forth, as well as identity access management. And then, of course, my clients all go through breaches, as everybody does nowadays, right? But, when I kind of look at it from a global perspective and say, what are our clients kind of struggling with right now? Or what, not necessarily struggling with, sometimes it's struggling with, but most of the times it's what are they focused on in changing their environments. And, a lot of them have fantastic departments that have been working in the space for a very long time. In other cases, it's new technologies that are coming out and they just don't have those skill sets in-house. We help them with some of the emerging trends. So we focus a lot on things like digitization, which, with the pandemic, it was coming. This just accelerated the move to digitization. And so that's an area that's hugely focused on. We also, kind of work a lot with them on zero trust. I mean, there's so much, I'll call it movement between what they're doing, the interaction with their suppliers and their customers, and the boundaries of an organization and what they need to focus on from a cyber perspective has changed. So there's no boundary anymore. So we got to help them kind of with looking through that and helping them implement the right solutions for their specific situation.
And then could you tell me more about zero trust?
Yeah, it's very simply put. It's kind of saying, in the past, you kind of sort of connected in and you automatically, two machines automatically trusted each other, or two companies automatically trusted each other. And right now we're saying, you just can't trust. So create a new trusted connection every time you connect. And so building out that entire infrastructure is pretty technical, but it's a journey. It's not you've got to do this right now and it's going to be 3 months of implementation and you're done. It's a journey because there's a lot of topics related to it. But so we work through, topics like zero trust. And interestingly, nowadays, I think you would know this as well. I mean, the whole world is very heavily into sustainability as well. So that's an area that we focus on as well. Even though there's maybe not a direct link to cyber, there is, as companies are going through, again, a journey for sustainability, because also not something that happens overnight, right? The ability to be able to report correctly, even assess your initial footprint in sustainability, and then to, on a continuous basis, be able to report back on how sustainable you are, that's all reliant on data, right? And data, you need to be able to trust the data at the end of the day. So a big cyber component there as well.
Oh no, you're completely right. And then one of the things you were mentioning is even around with zero trust of every single time needing to reestablish every login. I can imagine with how many different systems there are today, and just as an individual user, not even as a one system to another, all of the different connection points that are happening and that this is ever increasing. How much more complex do you see this world getting?
Oh, that's sort of I think, going to be the never-ending story for us, right, in our worlds, both from a personal perspective as well as professional. Because you're right. I mean, I think a couple of years ago they said the average number of devices that an individual connected into was at least 7. And at the time I thought that's impossible. And I started counting my personal connections or devices, and it was more than 7. So it affects us as individuals, but certainly as organizations, especially in the energy resources industrial space, and this move to digitization and smart factories and smart grids and all those kinds of things, right? We start opening up that entire connection point to needing to have automated input from our suppliers all the way to being connected with our customers. And so that's not going to change. All it's going to do is it's going to continue to require organizations to know that their second and the third parties and the fourth parties that they do business with are all secure. And so, the question is really going to be, where do you put the ring around accountability for what you can do from a cyber perspective? So it won't change. I mean, the world's not going to go backwards. It will go forwards. I mean, we're moving into a world of artificial intelligence and blockchain and all sorts of other great technologies. And that's all going to just continue to increase our need for cybersecurity.
Absolutely. And you mentioned this idea of having sort of ring fence around where does accountability start? Where do you see the role of cybersecurity in a company beginning? And then how do you see artificial intelligence changing a lot of this?
Yeah, so let me address that's a two-pronged question, right? So if I forget the second question by the end, just remind me. But the first one, as it relates to the role of security or cybersecurity in an organization, it started years ago being a very technical role, and you needed to know all the technologies to be able to implement, the pieces. And it wasn't that complex compared to today's world. But what we're increasingly seeing now is that the role of the chief cyber security officer, chief information security officer, is becoming a lot more business driven. And obviously they team up very closely with the chief information officer, the CIO, and it's becoming business roles, not just technology roles. Because when you talk about things like digitization, when you talk about interaction with customers, and you talk about things like how do you make the customer experience better, as an example, you don't want cybersecurity to be sort of a brake on the pedal. You want it to still be an accelerator, but with the right, checks and balances built into the system. So being able to work through those discussions of what is needed, what are the critical points that any interaction will need, and working through that to get to the right solutions is very critical.
I'm sure you get this a lot with the breaches that are happening, which feels like more and more. What are some of the biggest threats you see for cybersecurity or emerging threats that you're seeing?
The breaches, of course, are ever increasingly complex and well thought out, and it's not necessarily, a single person doing attacks on, these large multinational organizations, but very organized hacking groups or nation state. And, when we cannot think about breaches alone, they're complicated, but they tend to follow, once these new breaches come out, they tend to follow industry by industry. And so we've started seeing an incredible increase in the energy resources industrial industry with breaches. And, part of it is when we think about it, and how does it affect the consumer? It depends on the type of breach. It depends on the type of organization that's being hacked. I mean, not most recently, but one of the recent ones was the Colonial Pipeline one, which, the company did everything, of course, that they could, but, it affected a lot of the East Coast in terms of getting gas. And so a lot of people's day-to-day lives were affected to some extent. Was it debilitating to them? Probably not, but there was a perception that it was, right? So it depends on the type of breach. I mean, as some of these breaches kind of sort of, I'll say, move through the industry, it's going to be a different effect from each type of company within that industry. I will say, though, that, when we kind of look at some of the trends, I mean, breaches are here, they'll always be here. It's going to be about, it's not necessarily for organizations right now anymore about how well they defend, although they do need to defend very well. I mean, the response is really what I'm talking about. It's going to be critical, and they're going to have to do that well. What we're more focused on right now is to put them in a position where they don't necessarily get into the position of having a breach or minimize the risk of the breach. That's really what it is. And so there's a lot of technologies that we help them deploy. So I would say kind of that concept of putting them in a position to manage the risk of a breach the best way possible. That's one of the things that we're focused on. As it relates to some of the other trends that we're seeing, I think digitization is here to continue, and that'll continue to increase. And we're going to start seeing, more use of, like we talked earlier about artificial intelligence, analytics. We're going to start seeing, like we talked about, zero trust a little bit more. We're going to start seeing, the movement to cloud. So there's so much that this industry is working on. And then you couple that with these other pressures, continuing to make money, sustainability, which, and I know I mentioned sustainability before, but for this industry, it's huge, right? They're considered, one of the biggest contributors to sustainability. However, and I always find this fascinating because people say, how did you get into ER&I, right? It's not necessarily one that you would say it's a natural fit or anything for, somebody to say, I'm going to focus on that space. But it's such an interesting and fascinating industry. And, when we talk about sustainability, I can't think of another industry that's doing more to help combat the problem than they are. So, we see a lot of trends, and all these are influencers, like sustainability is an influencer on some of the cyber trends. And so we'll, obviously kind of deal with those as they come up. But just so much moving in these industries and changing that it continues to stay fascinating.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with that, is that how rapidly ER&I is changing and growing. And it's funny, very, very tangential. Right before I got on this podcast, I was talking about getting solar panels put on my roof, because I was like, this is the right thing to do. And they were like, why do you want to do this? I was like,
there you go. It's the right thing to do.
Because I have a new flat roof and I live in a city where I can, and this is what I should be doing. I should be changing my consumption, and just as an individual consumer. But we need all of these clients that you're working with to keep evolving at a much faster pace, so that, me and my little house can add some solar panels to the roof. And it's like you have this incredibly evolving industry, plus the digitization of the entire industry, the digitization of the manufacturing process. And then you have all of these threats, all of these cyber threats coming in at the same time, that it's got to be a fascinating, high pace, high change, really, really interesting space to be in.
Oh, it's absolutely exciting. And I tell you, in the early part of my career, I focused very heavily on cyber only. We talked about how do you kind of get to that intersection of the two. And I happened to work, although I worked in a number of different types of companies and different industries in the beginning, it just seemed to naturally fall more into the energy resources industrial type companies. And I think when I started really kind of talking to some industry experts and kind of just getting involved with how fascinating the industry was, and that marriage of cyber and industry really mattered to me. And I could really say, okay, I get it. This is really the fun part. And so, I think when you're kind of focused on changing businesses, and you can see the change around you, that's when it gets really interesting instead of just being stuck in a technology. But I'll tell you, cyber in and by itself as a profession is, we talk about how fascinating ER&I is. Cyber as a profession, or cyber as an area to focus on, is equally fascinating. I mean, it changes constantly, right? I mean, so the things I focused on 5, 10 years ago, and the things I'm focusing on now, and the things that we're going to be focusing on in the next 10 years or so is probably going to be different. And I can't necessarily say what they're going to be in 10 years. Is it going to be, quantum computing, the cyber aspects related to quantum computing? That's not even 10 years away. That's around the corner. But, it's going to continue to change. And that keeps cyber as a profession just so fascinating.
Oh, I can imagine. In the last 10 years, we had basically like 100 years of change and innovation in the last decade. And we need to basically assume that these innovation cycles are getting faster, more powerful, and more condensed. So if you think about it that way, 10 years from now, just the whole world is going to look different. 5 years from now, the whole world is going to look different. And you are talking about quantum computing and cyber. You're like, oh, that's around the corner. It's like, wait a second, this is around the corner? When did this happen?
Everything nowadays is around the corner, right? Because we're living in hockey stick worlds. Everything just seems to, that back end hockey stick just seems to be increasingly escalating in its timeline. So absolutely.
Completely. It's from consumer technology to business technology to cyber, and you mentioned blockchain and AI, and I'm sitting here going, I remember when blockchain just started rolling out, and this is new, but it's not new anymore.
It's not, and I mean, a lot of people kind of tend to think about blockchain as it's a financial services issue, and it's not. It's really kind of being that integrated ledger, and you can track inventory. You can do so many things. I mean, there's food producers that have tracked, I think it was lettuce, back to the farmer through these integrated ledgers a couple years ago, and that was how they kind of sort of got started on blockchain. So there's so many applications, that it will continue. I think 5 years from now we're going to talk about blockchain as it's par for the course in any organization, right?
And it really is going to be, how quickly can organizations grow and adapt? And in the beginning of our conversation, you talked about every companies were going digital, and then COVID hit, and I know that was your 10-year plan, but that is your 10-week plan right now. So how quickly can we move on this? And I think there's a ton of accelerators happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but even if you think about your own personal life, I mean, how many of us do all of our banking online, do a lot of our purchasing online, right? A lot of our worlds have become very digital, and we don't even think twice about buying something online anymore.
I remodeled my entire house, and pretty much everything I bought was bought through my phone or my computer, because I couldn't go to a store to buy this. So yeah, this is going to work. But could you imagine 5 years ago spending $10,000 for a home purchase on an app on your phone? You're like, that's insane. I would never do this.
But you're expecting inherent trust, right?
Yep. And I bought all of my appliances through an app on my phone from someone I'd never met before. But that's how this works. And you're completely right. Trust is at the center of it. And knowing that I have to trust the company I'm working with, the process for everything. And this is good, better, either way. I also trust American Express, so that if the purchase doesn't work and it's wrong, I can just call American Express and they'll just go and fight and give me my money back.
But you also had that inherent trust in cyber right there, because
100%.
you kind of trusted that your information was secure.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire process of the transaction.
Completely. And it was, I am spending all of this money online with companies I don't know. And I'm going to a website or to an app or whatever, and they're not going to steal my information. They're not going to steal my data. They're not going to steal my identity. And you're completely right. It is that inherent security behind everything that lets me go, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure I could spend this money with people I don't know.
Yeah, and you just talked about identity, and that's why the concepts even of implementing identity access management at organizations are so critical nowadays. It's been around for a while, but it's just gotten much more complicated and complex because, when we implement it, it's like you've got to be able to validate the identity of the people that work there, all the vendors, now all the suppliers, all the purchasers, all the machines. And in the ER&I world, it's now even identities of products and connected products to each other. Because connected products is just going to become huge. I mean, it's already big, but it's just going to continue to increase significantly to make sure that, we've got connected product security or inherent product security as well. So yeah, it's everywhere. Security is everywhere. Cyber is everywhere.
I think the idea of the connected products is so fascinating. And if I think about in the ER&I space, it is everything across what we do, every piece of energy that resources we interact with, and it's going to have sensor data that's pushing everything together to understand how these windmills are working and how windmills are generating power that's getting pushed to the grid. And it's just fascinating. And what's going to happen if a sensor goes down and you're losing data? Then what's happening? And did it go down because there was a breach, or did it go down because, I don't know, there was a storm? And it is such an interesting concept, an idea that you're seeing every day.
It really is. And that's actually been, we were talking breaches earlier. That was one of the big trends in breaches that we saw was in the connected product space. And I think we'll continue to see breaches in that section. I mean, but, like you said, your electricity meter is going to be a sensor out there that's a connected product. If you think about how many sensors there are in an electric vehicle, right? Or eventually in planes, or even in a manufacturing site, the more they digitize and become humanless, so to speak, right? It's all going to be about connected sensors, connected products. And so, the bigger the focus on that, and that's really an area that I'd say up until a couple of years ago, it's been around, of course, but up until a couple of years ago, there was a lot of manual intervention still with this, but it's just operational technology or sensor technology has just exploded in the last couple of years. And then, of course, it's not just putting the security in; it's continuing to monitor those sensors. So that's just a huge area for the ER&I industry.
No, definitely. And I think about monitoring those sensors, and then also just the tremendous amount of data that's being produced from my scientific number of a cajillion sensors going everywhere, pumping all of this data.
Yeah.
And what you're learning from this and trying to understand how things are working, make sure things are working, prevent security breaches, make sure you trust all the data that's coming in is just fascinating.
Yeah, and understanding what data matters, right?
Exactly.
Which, because not all data is created equal, just the same as nearly anything else, right? But knowing what you need to be able to do preventative maintenance on those sensors or on your shop floor or on your smart grid, that's going to be able to save companies a tremendous amount of data if they can actually have the right data to do that preventative maintenance. A lot of them are doing that already now. But that will certainly increase. But, it's fascinating to see how much we've started looking at OT in the ER&I space, not just for energy resource industrials, but if you think about it, it affects telecommunications, it affects your smart cities. It's going to be something that really just pushes all throughout our world.
Absolutely. So I think about the job that you've had and what you're working on, and you must have to make incredible amounts of decisions every single day, working with hundreds of companies. Everything you've done in your current role, what do you think the most difficult decision you've had to make is?
It's, and I think we've talked a little bit about this. It was that push and pull between cyber and industry, right? Because I think it's so easy to go 100% into cyber because there's so much in it, right? And it's fascinating. And we love being able to dive deep into every technology and come up with the trends and so forth that you can totally just be 100% cyber focused. Same with industry, right? Everything I just said, same applicability to industry. And so that push and pull is really hard. And so, that's an individual decision you have to make to say, yes, that's, I want to be able to get that balance, right? But it's also for, when we kind of serve our clients, and all of our people are, like I said, focused on both cyber as well as their respective industries. It's a hard decision for anybody that kind of sort of comes up through the ranks, I'd say, to say, now is a good time for me to change my focus a little bit, get to understand which aspect of cyber is the most fascinating to me and what I want to focus on personally, but also which industry do I find the most exciting that I personally want to focus on, And so I think for every person, it's a very individual choice. I mean, I happen to find my space. Somebody else is going to be absolutely passionate about healthcare and cyber, or financial services and cyber. And, there's no wrong answer because we need them all, right? So I think it's a tough decision when you're at a point in your life and you say, okay, what am I really, really interested as an individual, right? And kind of finding that niche that is yours and yours only, and knowing you can make a difference in it, So that was sort of a personal part of it, but I think that every professional, I think, in our space would need to go through the same thing as well.
Definitely. And then you mentioned a little bit about sort of the personal and the personal choices behind it. Outside of your current role, what's the most difficult decision you've had to make in your career?
Well, I'm a mother, and when you have children, it's that same kind of push and pull that you need to think about. When are you going to lean in more being a parent and a wife, and when are you going to lean in more to continue to be a professional in your chosen profession, right? And where is that balance? And so, so I think it's kind of a similar push and pull decision, which is hard. I think every woman that goes through this is got to make some of those tough decisions, right? And again, there's no right or wrong, right? And frankly, it's whether you're a woman with children or a woman with whatever other responsibilities, right? I think some of that push and pull is always going to be there. So I think those are tough decisions that you have to make, but you got to be comfortable with your choice. You got to trust that you made the right decision, and you don't look back.
I think that is excellent advice, because it's so easy to always go back and say, what if I did this differently? And you know what? You can't. And be confident.
You can't do 20/20 vision.
It would be so easy if we could, wouldn't it? Of now that I know how this worked out, if I would have turned left instead of right.
It's funny. I'll never forget when my youngest two twins. They were probably about 9 or 10. I did keep asking them the question, and I said, "Well, do you want me to work less? Do you want me to get a different job?" And they kept saying, "No, you're fine."
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, a couple of years later, I said, "You guys were always fine with me doing the job I do. Why was that?"
Mm-hmm.
When you had a lot of your friends as parents were around a lot more, and they said, "Mom, if you were around anymore, you'd have driven us crazy." I was like, okay, well, that was just a question at 10 years old. They're older than that, much older than that by now. But I was like, you know what? Your decisions are always the right ones.
100%. And I read a study that was parents today and moms today actually spend more time with their kids than moms in the 50s that were sort of stay at home.
Yeah.
And we just find more time somehow to work and to spend time with kids than a lot of women did at a time where they were.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, as a mom in cyber, what was great was my kids always would tell their friends who would come over, don't do anything on your devices here. My mom is in cyber. She knows everything, right? And I never had any tracking tools on them, but they thought I knew everything because I was in cyber.
And it's better that way. It is
great.
better of the you know not to go to this website, not to go to this place. Mom knows every single thing that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Just be a good kid.
It worked out. It worked out. That's for sure.
And I know you recently launched a Women in Cyber campaign. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, it's so exciting. We're so excited about it. We actually have had, within Deloitte, we've had a Women in Cyber campaign internally for many years. And we sort of recently decided to take it external as well because, when we, for a couple of different reasons, when we look at the numbers, right? I mean, in cyber, there's projected to be about 145% need to just meet the current demand. And, that's a huge number. That's sort of one aspect of it. The second is when we look at teams, and any team, and cyber is no different than that, right? I mean, you need diversity of thinking. You need, our clients are representative of women in IT, and we need the same in cyber as well. And so we created this program, Women in Cyber campaign. It was created by us as women for women. And we want to encourage, younger professionals, even from, when they're in high school deciding what they want to do one day. We want to encourage them to think about cyber, and we want them to see that, you can be a cyber professional, you can be a cyber leader. And so it's really trying to change that mindset that this is not just for men, right? I mean,
Yeah.
We talked about breaches. If you want to be a hacker, an ethical hacker, there's different skill sets involved in that. And, the ethical hackers don't just consist of male teams, right? And so let's meet that sort of face on. Let's bring women along and let them realize that they can do these same jobs, right? And they can have the capabilities and skills to be successful in cyber as well.
Oh, you're 100% right. And it's the multitasking and the creative thinking and the diversity of thought, I think, is such an important perspective, because if you are going to combat hackers, if you're going to be in cyber, we also have to realize that the people on the other side, whether it's individuals or designing the machines that are giving us all jobs in the cyberspace, don't all look, sound, think, and act the same. So on the other side, if you want to be in cybersecurity, you're only going to be as effective as the diversity of your team, who's thinking of all of the different angles and is coming up with ways to really sort of creatively analyze and protect.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it starts from high school age and college age, and we want to try to keep the number of women that are interested in cyber. We want to keep those numbers up and continue to work at colleges and encourage women to move into the space of cyber and become cyber professionals. And through the Women in Cyber program, we want to celebrate what women have achieved so far, right, and show them that there are role models out there. There are women that have done well in the world of cyber, and they can be that as well.
How else can we inspire young women to explore opportunities in cyber and STEM fields? What more can we do?
Continue to push them into the field. There's a huge gap, as I said, and I think by the end of 2021, only about 25% of all cyber roles will be filled by women. We in Deloitte have about the same ratio at this point, and it's going to be podcasts like yours. It's going to be, like I said, showing up at colleges, at high schools. It's going to be talking to our friends and their children, their daughters, right, and continuing to work with the professionals that we work with in the space of cybersecurity, and frankly, keeping them in cybersecurity, right? Because we want to really just address that gender deficit like head on with the upcoming generations. We have to do it. I think it's the right answer to do it, and we will be more successful with that.
You are 100% right, and it is unfortunately, we can't combat the tail end of where much more seasoned professionals are today as much. But if we go into your point to high schools to start pushing these as potential careers and showing young women what's possible, like that ends up just compounding over time. And as well as I do, how quickly time just sort of fleets
Sure
by.
does, right?
Um,
It sure does.
it is terrifying how quickly time goes. But
Don't think about it.
no, I'm trying not to. As I was cleaning out old photos, when I was cleaning out my apartment the other day, and I went, "Oh, I was 20 there. Oh, that was sweet. That was sweet. I remember that. I don't know how that happened or where the last time went."
Yeah.
But if we think that way, if we start to get into high schools and inspire these young women into cybersecurity, into STEM related fields, 10 years from now, the gap will be so much smaller. 20 years from now, hopefully it'll be non-existent.
Absolutely.
I went to a math and science high school, and I get the little like alumni newsletter. And there's a group in it, which I just thought was the best name ever. And it was, I think it's the robotics team, and they're called FE Maidens to be Iron Maiden.
Oh, that's
And
great.
I was like, that is amazing.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
This is the appropriate amount of nerdiness all in one place. And I loved that they had the women's robotics team at my high school. And I went, I wish they had that when I was in high school. I probably would have, I don't know, not paid any attention to it because I was in high school and was far too cool to do anything. But
right. Yeah. Yeah. I think schools have come such a long way, as have businesses,
Yes.
right? As have businesses. But it's not going to stop. I mean, we kind of sort of have to keep that pressure on to make sure that we keep focusing on it so that we can bring more and more women into this space.
Nope, totally agree. I can talk to you about this all day, and I feel like we have to get you. We hosted a Women in Data Summit recently that was just amazing. We have to get you on the next one that we do, and we had a NASA astronaut was on it, and she had just come back from space.
Exciting.
We had another woman that was an expert in AI. We had another woman that was an actress and model who turned coder. It was just this incredibly interesting, diverse group of people. So the next one we do, we have to
fantastic. Love it.
Get you on this one. And then I have a couple of quick questions to the quick fire questions at the end of the interview. So don't overthink anything.
Sure.
They hopefully should be light and fun. What is one talent or skill that's not on your resume?
Interior design. I absolutely love that. I mean, if you want me to do a modern house or a farmhouse style, I mean, I absolutely enjoy doing that. It's just a fun, and time-consuming but fun activity and skill that I love doing.
Oh my God, Renee, where were you? I've been remodeling this house. It has been killing me. I can't pick a coffee table to save my life.
Oh no, I've always enjoyed that. So that's pretty much what all the books in my library are about. So I truly enjoy that.
It's amazing. It's the creativity of all of it.
Right.
What do you have a TV show or podcast or a book or anything you've been binging lately?
Queen's Gambit.
Ooh.
I think it actually just got a bunch of Emmys or whatever TV awards now recently as well. But yeah, that's the last one that I've been watching.
That was a very good one.
But, definitely binge through it. So.
Do you have any advice for cyber professionals stepping into leadership roles?
Be true to yourself. Have integrity in everything that you're doing and trust yourself and trust your teams. Everybody's going into it with the right intentions. And you're never an island. There's always help around you. So rely on others and trust that what they're doing for you is right. And, enjoy what you're doing. Have humor with it all.
And final question, what is the top piece of advice you'd give the younger version of yourself?
We all make mistakes. And don't let the mistakes rule you. Learn from them. Mm-hmm. I've always kind of, said to myself, nobody's ever moved forward by looking in the rear view mirror, right? And so, embrace who you are, embrace what you've done, mm-hmm. and take any mistake and take it as an opportunity to improve. And, you do so much more right than you do wrong, right? And so celebrate the successes just as well as you celebrate some of the failures as well, because, as long as you're true to yourself, you will be fine, even with those. So
I love that.
That's probably what I would say.
That is a really, really good one. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. This has been absolutely fantastic. And for everyone that is looking, if you are bored with your job or the function that you're in and you need a little excitement, cybersecurity in the energy space seems like a way to go.
Lauren, thank you so much. It was lovely, and it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for having me.
Truth Be Known is brought to you by Talend. A leader in data integration and data integrity, Talend enables every company to find clarity amidst the chaos. Talend Data Fabric brings together in a single platform all the necessary capabilities that ensure enterprise data is complete, clean, compliant, and readily available to everyone who needs it throughout the organization. Learn more at talend.com. That's TALEND.com.